Welcome back, fight fans, to another electrifying episode of Between Rounds. I'm Mike Petracca, and today we have a real treat for you. Our special guest, David, the Viking Samurai Kurzhal, isn't just a lifelong martial artist and natural bodybuilder, he's also making waves in the world of film. He starred in action-packed films like The Last Kumite and the soon-to-be-released Bloodstorm. But that's not all. On September 28th, in the heart of Philadelphia, he'll step into the ring for what promises to be an unforgettable showdown against none other than Hall of Fame boxing legend, Sugar Shane Mosley. A man with Viking heritage and samurai spirit, he's here to talk about his journey, his challenges, and his unyielding self-belief. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for the unstoppable force that is David, the Viking Samurai Kurzhal. Hi everyone, Mike Petracca back at it again for the World Cup of Martial Arts Between Rounds series, where I interview the very best martial artists in the world. And today, we have the honor of catching a rising star in film and martial arts. He is a lifelong martial artist, a natural bodybuilder, a screenwriter and actor, starring in films such as The Last Kumite and soon-to-be-released Bloodstorm. And on September 28th, in the tough fighting town of Philadelphia, where Rocky Balboa's Yo 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 is more popular than Santa's Ho Ho Ho, he's set to face off against Hall of Fame boxer, multi-weight champion, Sugar Shane Mosley in the main event of the official Celebrity Boxing. One half Viking heritage, the other half samurai, make up his wildly popular YouTube channel. I'm talking about David, the Viking Samurai Kurzhal.
Hey, Mike, that was a great introduction. Everything was right on point, man. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. And, all right, I got to ask you right off the bat, many fighters kind of cherry pick their opponents, to suit their needs, to help them look good, and sometimes they end up fighting lesser competition as a result. For example, we have Canelo Alvarez recently picking Jaime Munguia and now Edgar Berlanga instead of fighting David Benavidez, which is what everybody seems to want him to fight. But we won't knock Canelo too much. He's earned the right. And then, of course, we have Jake Paul picking on MMA guys past their prime, mediocre boxers, etc. But what you're doing, David, is something totally different. You're, after one fight, going after a legendary fighter that has beaten, and I got to say this just for the audience, just so they know who you're picking on here. Oscar De La Hoya, twice he's beaten. TKO'd Antonio Margarito in his prime, has shared the ring with Canelo, Miguel Cotto, Manny Pacquiao, and has been the closest to knocking out Floyd Mayweather that I've ever seen. David, why are you shaking the powerful oak tree that is named Sugar Shane Mosley?
That's a great question, man. And so would probably think I'm insane because Sugar Shane Mosley is one of the greatest boxers of all time.
All time.
And the only other guy that he did an exhibition match against was Shaquille O'Neal. 7'1" Shaquille O'Neal. He beat Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal is a tremendous athlete. So regardless of the sport, he would be hard to beat in anything.
No doubt.
I just wanted to have the ultimate challenge. It's like it's what I needed in my life, and I'm kind of redefining middle age in a way as far as you hear the term midlife crisis, whereas I had a midlife realization that I could still do everything I ever wanted to do. Right? Middle age could just be the beginning of a lot of new adventures, including getting a start in the fight world, or I got a late start in the movie world. I mean, I got a late start into Christianity. I got a late start in a lot of things.
Right.
But I realized it's almost like a basketball game, and now it's like, okay, well, half the game's over, and as far as it's subjective for people, but I feel like I'm losing the game, like the game of life, right? But I could still win. I could still turn around at halftime and win. And that was my midlife realization. So in order to win, I can't be picking or trying to do these smaller fights as far as you kind of insinuated that maybe Canelo's fighting a guy that he knows he can beat.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, Jake Paul has picked guys that he knows he can beat.
Right.
And it's not like they were not good opponents, but for Jake Paul, they were levels below him and smaller and quite older.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm doing the opposite. I'm like, let me
You
pick
are.
and try to get a fight against a guy that I should not, under any circumstances, be able to beat, at least on paper, because
Right.
boxing is his world. Like, I'm a lifetime martial artist. If it were a karate match, I'm very comfortable. That's my world. But
Right.
as far as boxing goes, that's his world that I'm entering. And I've always referred to him as my Mount Everest. And nobody is supposed to stroll up Mount Everest. Assuming you can conquer and climb Mount Everest,
Mm-hmm.
it kicks your ass, but you can still, get to the top. And that's what I plan to do with my crazy, some people may say, semi-delusional self-belief on thinking that I can beat Mosley. Like, I know I'm not going to outbox him. I know
Right.
I'm not going to be
Right.
a more technical boxer. That's just not going
Right.
to happen. But we've seen many fights, many boxing matches where the most technical guy doesn't always win. There's other ways to win.
This is true. And
And,
styles do
I
make
got
the
a lot of
fights.
heart. I got a lot of discipline. That's true. That's true. And when he sees me, it'll be a little bit different, which could work in my favor because I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
classically trained boxer. So it'd be a little unorthodox for him. So, I always said boxers are best against other boxers.
Mm-hmm.
Karate guys are best against other karate guys because they kind of know what to expect.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there were ideas because for example, we've seen Jake Paul, who exclusively trains in boxing, beating MMA guys who aren't boxers.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been able to take those guys apart
Pretty technically.
pretty easily, but he's got a huge age advantage and size advantage. So their more unorthodox style of boxing didn't work for them. But I do think that is going to work in my favor. And I'm younger than Mosley.
Well,
Physically, we're about the same
that's what I
size. We're going
wanted
to
to
fight at
ask you.
175, by the way, for the.
I want to ask you. I want to ask you about that. Anyone that understands the fight game knows that power is the last attribute to diminish. Just how dangerous is Sugar Shane Mosley still at 52?
Extremely dangerous because he's got his speed, he's got his power. He did a recent workout the day before the press conference a couple days ago, or a couple weeks ago rather, in Philly, and he's got all that speed, and obviously he's got all that power. And he started his career 32-0 with 30 knockouts. He's got
He's a heavy
41
hitter.
knockouts
He's a heavy-handed guy.
total. He's a heavy hitter. Yeah, I don't plan to be 42, by the way. And there's only one guy that ever finished him, too. So not only does he have power, so again, on paper, he should be able to knock me out. And there's no way I should be able to knock him out because he's only been finished once in
Right.
all of those fights. And,
Right.
that was by a very high level professional boxer. So I do believe at his age, though, his reflexes may be a little diminished. So even though he's got all his speed and power, like, how are his reflexes? We'll find out. Obviously, somebody who's a little bit older, for like a mixing it up, very high level guys. So he's extremely dangerous.
And you mentioned, David, that the weight you're going to be fighting is at 175. Is that a comfortable weight for you to be agile enough but still keep your power?
I've pretty much been this size since I was 16 years old. I mean, I've gotten well over 200 pounds at one point, but I cut back down to this size. This is like a very natural weight that I've literally had for decades. So I don't know how long Shane's been this size. I know he's walking around the same size at like 180. He's looking sharp.
Okay.
But he fought like 135, 140, like a lot lower. So 175 isn't really like his natural like this for decades.
And now tell me, as a bodybuilder, having that background, and of course in martial arts, already in shape, because I've always seen you, whether it be on your channel, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. You seem like you stay in tip top shape all the time. Was it easier to say yes to the Mosley fight versus if you weren't in as good a shape?
Coming from a background of being heavily disciplined, already got the diet down,
Yep.
all that. So that part's easy. So I already got that's a huge aspect of it, coming in even better shape than I am right now because I'll peak. Obviously building up the endurance even more by the September 28th. Confidence, being in shape, but also just knowing that I don't have an issue with like being disciplined. Like I'm not going to have an issue with the diet. I'm not going to have an issue with doing all the workouts, which I'm training twice a day. Like that's not going to be an
Okay.
issue. That's my strong suit. It's like I was in the boxing gym earlier today. I'm going to do my strength conditioning, a little bit after this interview. So that's not an issue at all. Whereas some people struggle with that and they miss workouts.
Mm-hmm. And has your training regimen and diet had to change for this fight versus your normal schedule? And if so, how much?
The main thing I added was all that boxing earlier today. So because I'm working out so much, yeah, for the what I was mentioning for the recovery. So I do the boxing in the morning, the strength and conditioning at night, and I'm in the sauna quite a bit for recovery. That helps, and that actually
Okay.
improves your cardiovascular too.
Excellent. So that's been the only change you've been making?
Well, with the weightlifting, a little bit lighter, a little more reps, more explosive, and because I'm not using quite as heavy weights, there's less risk for injury. So I got to be
Got it.
very careful that I don't get injured with that, big fight coming up. So that's
Right, because you
been the
tore
big change.
was it the bicep you tore in your first fight and you fought with that?
Well, I tore that in late November and then had that fight on March 9th. So it wasn't fully
Uh,
healed. I was working around it as best I can, but I
yeah.
was very limited with that left arm. And I felt if I was just aggressive and used the right lead, I would be fine. Because that was only a 3-round fight. So if I stayed aggressive, it worked out. So, but yeah, that was very limited. There's no way I could fight Shane Mosley in that condition. Luckily, that
Right.
bicep's completely healed,
Good.
so that won't be
Good.
an issue. I got, I need 100% of both arms to stand a fighting
Hell yeah.
chance.
Hell yeah, man. And what are some specific improvements that you've made from your first celebrity boxing fight that you're going to take with you in the Mosley fight?
Oh, so much. I've just had to be on such an accelerated rate of the level that I need to get to. Like so much more footwork, head movement. I'm working with Phil Polina a lot. I was working out at his gym, though he was he had to do like some business related things in Florida, so he wasn't really there. But I was working with Don Wilson for a
Yeah.
couple weeks, getting comfortable with the high guard. Don, of course, 11-time world kickboxing champion, and I felt like okay, if I get comfortable with just some basic stuff, I'll be okay for that fight on March 9th. Whereas
Right. Right.
mostly, Phil's got to take me to like a very high level very quickly. And in order to get that, it's a lot of the footwork and head movement specifically because of the Taekwondo and karate background I have. I don't have a lot. I haven't worked on a lot of head movement, but
Right.
we're
Right.
working
Right.
on a lot of that. I just got to be as elusive as I can and have it very hard for Mosley to catch me. And every once in a while, hopefully, be able to land that counter
Yep.
that just comes that just naturally comes in the movement when you're moving. So I have a lot of faith in Phil that he could take me there. Like would I want to fight Mosley tomorrow? Hell no. And Phil would say
Yeah.
no, no. But we're getting closer every day to where I need to get. And by September 28th, I should just be good enough where I'll put on a good fight and possibly even get that upset. I do believe that. Like I'll just get to that level where it's like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
literally have a chance level.
Where do you feel you are now in the climb up Everest? What stage do you feel like you're at?
Oh man, because we're less than 2 months away,
Yeah. It's
and
getting crunch time, baby.
I luckily like we were talking about, I'm already in shape.
Yep.
I'm almost near weight already. The cardio is good. I do a lot of swimming. I know people say run, run, run. I felt the swimming is actually helping me quite a bit. we're
Hey,
getting
Alexander Usyk spends like 4 hours in the pool, man. His training is unbelievable in
oh
the pool.
wow.
He swears by it. The man's a monster.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Wow, that's a lot of time in the pool.
Right.
But you know, we're implementing more and more sparring, and I'm getting more and more comfortable. So where we're at in the Everest climb, I mean, we obviously got a ways to go, but I got a lot of good stuff in my favor. It's just getting all that technical stuff. It's just getting those movements where, because I know Shane's going to be kind of on autopilot in a way. It's like he's been in that world forever, and he's not going to have to think. There won't be those hesitations. He'll just react.
Right,
So I'm
right.
trying to get to the point where, every once in a while I'll land something that I'm not even aware of. It's like it just comes. But when there's more moments of that, that's when I know I got a real chance, because any delay, any fraction of a second delay, I'll miss them. It's got to be that quick and that precise, and just in the zone where it's like you're moving and you're throwing without even like, I mean, you've drilled it so many times, right?
You got to have that
But you
muscle
do it to the
memory
point
to
where it's like
react, right?
you're not even like thinking, there's not that thought process that delays you.
So, in the ring is a very, very lonely place. I've been there as a very amateur boxer. You've been there in your first fight, and certainly, I'm sure in your karate training. How do you cope with those feelings when that bell rings and it's just you and the other guy, and that other guy is trying to take you down?
With like a lot of things in life in general now, I just try to enjoy the experience for what it is.
Mm.
Like for example, a lot of people have fear of public speaking. A lot of people might have some fear if they're doing a karate tournament or a boxing match, because another guy's literally trying to hurt you. Uh for what it is, I just enjoy the experience, knowing that who knows how much time we have left here, and I'm just trying to enjoy it as much as I can. So even the whole thing with Shane, for example, and I had referenced like Mount Everest is supposed to kick your butt,
Yeah, man.
and I do feel like I'll go the distance, and I have again a crazy self belief that I feel I will pull off the crazy upset. It's funny because even in the press conference, I said this would be the biggest upset in boxing history if I win, and
Absolutely.
he said, yeah. He said, of course it would, but you're not going to win.
I
But I
saw
mean,
that. I saw that. Yeah, I
that's
saw that.
just the scale of it. Like I know what stands in front of me as far as that challenge goes, and at the end of the day, whatever happens, I'm going to be proud that I got to share in one of the all-time greats boxing history. Like there'll be a little blurb about me in Wikipedia that, hey, he had an exhibition match against Shaquille O'Neal and also this Viking Samurai dude,
That's amazing,
and
isn't
and
it?
I'm
Isn't
honored
that
to be a
amazing?
part of like his boxing history. So,
So, all right, you go the distance with Sugar Shane Mosley. What's the first thing you do?
oh man, I'll be on top of the world, because a guy is a knockout artist, and it's going to be 6 rounds, so there's plenty of time
There's
to
a lot of
get
time.
finished, or plenty of time to get the upset. So, but just and just lasting, like that's what Rocky One was. He survived. He had a couple of moments where he looked good and he survived. So I'd have to pat myself on the back.
Hell yeah, man. Now I know you've said in previous interviews that this fight with Mosley is a real life Rocky story, and I couldn't agree more. Are you adhering to any of Rocky's training regimens, such as downing raw eggs at 4 a.m., pounding raw meat, abstaining from sex, or getting blessings from an old Italian priest?
I could use all the blessings. So anybody watching, send those my way. I do believe in that quite a bit. The other stuff, no raw eggs, no pounding meat, and the other thing, the girlfriend complains about. But anyway, anyway, uh, yeah, such a motivational movie. I hope to basically utilize this as assuming, I don't embarrass myself and I do look good and put up a real fight, and maybe
Yeah.
even who knows, you know, do the near impossible. I want people to be motivated by this. Not just the fight itself and the outcome, but just like, it wasn't that long ago where I was just sitting in a cubicle. I was a stockbroker.
Mm,
I felt unfulfilled. I needed a creative outlet. Like most people, I got big hopes and dreams. And a couple of years ago, I just decided, because I got connections into the boxing world, and
Yep.
boxing is a lot more popular than other fighting arts. And I've always been interested in boxing, and I just wanted to see, let me really see how good I can get.
Mm,
But more importantly, I always believed I could get a big fight, and I
yeah.
had said, like, getting the big fights the biggest challenge, because,
Right.
like,
Right.
how do you get a big fight? Like, I kind of networked and talked myself into it, and there's a little bit of luck on my side, and the universe literally put me and Mosley together, where I proposed the whole thing to him as well, months back. So, but just a story like that alone, if it wasn't happening to me, I could almost see myself looking at somebody and be like, yeah, how could that happen? Something like that would never happen to me. But it's
Right.
like, no, it could happen to you. Like,
Right.
it's the power of networking, man. Like, you could literally almost make anything happen if you really believe it. I feel the universe will, like, provide the different pieces of the puzzle. Like, it's not going to put the puzzle together for you. Nothing's ever that
Right.
easy.
Right. Right.
But if it's constantly in your mind, you'll start noticing things and meet in the universe. I like to say God, but you could just say the universe if you're not religious, will
Sure.
start putting the right people around you. And if you figure out a way, again, the right pieces of the puzzle, put them together, like, you could put something together. Like, it's kind of crazy because last year I was in Germany fighting in the movie Kumite. Like, I grew up
Yeah.
watching Bloodsport, one of my favorite movies of all time. Next
Amazing.
thing I know, like, here's a movie like Bloodsport. I'm fighting in the movie Kumite, that's insane. And then now Rocky, also one of my favorite movies, is like, well, now I could kind of, in many ways, be the real life Rocky. I have this opportunity for greatness. Like, I have a shot at greatness if I put all this
Ama-
stuff together with all the trainings, the different pieces of the puzzle that I'm putting together.
Right. Right.
Along with the self belief, along with the discipline, along with I feel like I'm aligned and got associated with the coach Phil Polina for a
Yeah.
reason. Like, and I was associated with a bunch of other people, and I'm not saying I couldn't become a much better boxer with them and
Right.
improve my skills. I just feel like they wouldn't take me to where I know Phil's going to take me.
Well, and tell me about the necessity of, putting in the work in order to manifest your destiny. For example, like a person aspiring to be a bodybuilder, right, could take all the creatine in the world, but if they're lying on the couch all day, they're not likely to get the desired result, correct?
Yeah, the thing with the bodybuilding, see, that's an interesting example because I've always been interested in bodybuilding. Now, on the professional level, they take a lot more than creatine. Obviously, they take a lot of illegal substances. But even with all the illegal substances in the world and hardcore training, there's such a genetic component with bodybuilding. You have to have the right
Oh,
full
interesting.
muscle bellies. Your body has to
Yeah.
respond. There are guys who don't even lift who look better and are more muscular than guys that lift for years because they just genetically, have
I,
more potential
it's funny you said
naturally.
because I remember a ESPN, their 30 for 30 of Bo Jackson. And I remember him saying in that he just had the big fancy gym because people expected him to have the gym. But he said he did not, he said he didn't work out as much as people thought.
That's just a genetic freak, an
Right?
outlier.
Right?
You know,
Everybody wanted to
in
be like
fact,
Bo.
his muscles were so powerful. I think that's what ended his career. Like in football, where they were trying to tackle him, and he basically ripped his hip out of its socket because he was so powerful moving. It's like that's abnormal. That's how explosive this guy naturally was.
Unbelievable. And I know you mentioned, Last Kumite, and I know Bloodstorm is coming out soon. I got to ask because we're the same around the same age. I mean, I'm just another middle-aged guy realizing his dreams and going after them in his in his soon to be 40s. But how has it been working with the iconic screenwriter director Sheldon Littich, who worked on legendary movies such as Lionheart, Bloodsport, Legionnaire, Double Impact, and my personal fave that brought capoeira to the mainstream, Only the Strong.
Sheldon's a great guy. I've spent a pretty good amount of time with him now. Like, even where I'm staying in California, he doesn't live that far away. So we'll meet up and share meals, usually with a group of other people trying to get different projects and networking and stuff. So he was slightly associated with a project called Warrior Island last year. James Jefferson, the creator, great guy. Sheldon didn't play a big hand, but he was going to in the future. And he's writing like the future screenplay, and he was going to direct, and he still might. We'll see what happens. But he was at least on set observing and giving some direction when he was there to kind of help out the production. So from like a professional level, that's the work I've done with them so far. Now, after the fight, and this is tied in directly to the fight, Mouthful of Knuckles film by David Kirst, producer and writer. Sheldon's already attached to direct. I'm going to be one of the villains in that movie. Not a fight role, which I actually like, because I don't want to get typecast of, oh, this guy just fights in every movie.
Exactly.
Not that I'm opposed to that, but this is more of an acting role where I'm kind of like a thug villain type, big shootout with people, all this kind of stuff. So it's like so out of character for me. And it'll really be able to show off the acting chops more. People could see that character, and it's like, that's nothing like David in real life. It's like, good, because I'm trying to play a character that you kind of see the character, you don't see me, and that proves the acting ability that I have after people see that, but so yeah, working with someone like Sheldon, I mean, that's going to be extraordinary. And that's just the crazy thing about manifestation, because like, look, I grew up watching his movies, loved his movies, would never in a million years think I would end up meeting him, let alone working with him.
Right.
And it's the same thing with like Steven Seagal. I love Steven Seagal movies, and now like over the last couple of years, I built a relationship where I talk to him. He's gonna help train me, like all this stuff, and who knows, maybe even work on a movie with him. So it's just ridiculous that my childhood growing up in the 80s and 90s and everything that I was so like into, I've just become such a part of that world. I know a lot of these people now. I've worked with some of them, and now I'm even doing what I was watching back then, doing these movies, and even the fight with Mosley. It's kind of crazy because again, it was just a few years ago where I was sitting in a cubicle as a stockbroker, having people yelling at me because they're losing money investing. Not recommendations I gave, by the way, but just in general, people like to call in and complain if something's going wrong, and you're like a literal punching bag over there. And it is what it is. It's not a bad career, but nobody's necessarily. They'd rather be somewhere else. I'll just put it that way. And luckily,
when did you know you needed to change? When did you know it was time to change?
Oh, okay. I'll tell you, because it's kind of interesting. People are going to have mixed feelings about it. I would say it's a pretty effed up situation, and I think things happen for a reason that may not make sense at the time, but looking back and reflecting on it, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. So I was not happy.
This must be a good one. This might be good.
It's a really good one, man.
A drink, buddy, through here.
It's a really good one, and it's sad that the world and a lot of companies are like this right now. It may make sense to some people. It's very unfair to other people. But long story short, I'm working as a stockbroker, got my Series 7, I want to move up. So I get my Series 9 and 10 so I could get into leverage investments, options, and futures. The Series 10, by the way, is very hard to get. Like it's got maybe 5% of people pass that exam the first time. Now, people may pass it the second or third time, but you're almost guaranteed to fail the first time you take it, I did pass it the first time, and I was very proud of that because I studied so much. And I remember taking those exams. I'm like, I never want to do this again, because I was studying for months in all my free time. And that's, one reason why I passed it the first time. Anyway, I get the licenses and I want to go to the other team. And I was on the active trader team at the time, but my own manager said, well, you're not going to get that position. I said, why? He said, because you're white.
You did, what's up?
Well, see, it didn't matter. They were doing their whole equity thing. So they said, because the only people on that team were straight, white, and Asian males. So my own manager literally told me, unless you were black, Hispanic, gay, or a woman, you're not going to get that position. Long story short, they did end up giving it to a gay Hispanic guy who didn't even get his series 9 and 10.
Yeah.
But it left a bad taste in my mouth. No, look, now I could have always went to another brokerage firm, but just knowing that you're limited based off of your race, that you have no control over, you were just born that way. But they're saying, look, there's too many people like you doing that, and we
Right.
need to
Right.
diversify, even if people aren't even qualified. Because like I said, the guy that got it didn't even have a series 9 and 10.
Yeah.
I'm sure he got it by now.
Right.
So,
Right.
it left a bad taste in my mouth. But at the end of the day, I wasn't happy there. I feel like had I got that position, I would have been comfortable enough. I would have been complacent. I would have kept moving up and probably been stuck there. But see, here's the thing. I was on the active trader team. Next to us were the global investment team. These are those veterans that were there for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And when I looked at them, it looked like they had the life and soul sucked out of them. And that was
Oh, I've seen
like
that look before
looking
too.
into the,
It's not a life.
yeah, it is scary. And that's like looking at my future in 20 years, being like, I could be like one of those guys, which I'm sure they make a comfortable enough living to keep them there. But none of them wanted to like do that in their life. And they wanted to grow up and be miserable. It's like, no, I guarantee you none of those people like waking up on Monday morning going there. And that could have been my life. And that's a lot of people's lives. But you can escape that. And I'm escaping that, luckily, thankfully.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, that's tough, man. But hey, well, a quick follow up to that one. What is more cutthroat, working at the brokerage firm or Hollywood?
Oh, that's a good question, man. Like
I don't
in
want to get
Hollywood,
anybody in trouble, man. I just had a quick follow up. I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
like right now in the acting career, I've been doing a lot of independent stuff.
Yep.
So not really dealing with a lot of the big studios and everything that comes with that. Now, obviously, I want to get into bigger and bigger movies. Like I think anybody who's involved in anything, they want to keep climbing that ladder, so to speak, right?
Right. Right.
So that's one thing that I feel like this Mosley fight will help in an indirect way because it will boost popularity. And I've talked to a lot of different people, and I know studios look at your social media numbers.
Yep.
Like if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, that's valuable. Whereas like if you're a great actor and have 0 following, that kind of hurts you,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
sucks, in a way. But if you can build that following, it can help in, so many areas. So, but the thing is, with everything I'm doing right now, I was even telling my brother this before, like the Mosley fight was official. Of like, because there's a project that I wrote, a great screenplay that I plan to get made at some point next year, and that's one of my dream projects. Where I told my brother of like all the stuff that's going on and what I want to do. This was before the Mosley fight was official. It's like if I could just pick one thing, I'd pick the Mosley fight because
Mhm.
it's not the easiest thing. It's actually the hardest thing. But having that extreme challenge to really push and test myself to see how good I can get by that date
Right.
and see if I could go the distance and maybe even get the upset. Of course, I'm going to try to get the upset, but I'm not going to delude myself because this is a guy that beat Oscar De La Hoya twice. I'm not
Sure.
boxing's not my background. It's like, I would be delusional if I said, oh yeah, well, I'll beat the guy that beat De La Hoya twice.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
okay, well, have you been boxing for 20 years? No. Have you been boxing for 10 years? No. It's like, how are you going to beat him in boxing? So I'm very self-aware basically, but I still have
Absolutely.
crazy self-belief.
And one of the things I wanted to, several psychological studies, especially lately, have shown that people with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset are more resilient and lead more fulfilling lives. Have you always had this growth mindset that you have now, or how did you cultivate that?
I've always had that. I've always been about self-improvement. I started working out and doing martial arts since I was 13 and never looked back. That obviously works on the physical side. Uh, it kind of ties in a lot into the mental and even spiritual side too. Um, you know, so I've always, like I used to read those self-help books back in like college. I
Okay.
was just trying to improve myself and become like a better individual, like in some way,
Mm,
physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so that was always like natural for me. And I always have that white belt mentality. Plus, I'm just a natural optimist as far as
mm,
like glass is half full. I'm
yeah.
always trying to like find, at least the silver lining, but focus on the positive, because people, whatever you focus on, that becomes your reality.
Yes.
What
It grows.
it
Yeah.
really becomes a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like
Whatever you water will grow.
if I was just this jaded individual and I thought people were horrible and great opportunities happen for some people, but it'll never happen for me. Like if I believed that, I would just be miserable and nothing would happen,
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's like one issue that I know people talk about, and I have an issue with, like the mainstream media. They poison your brain. It's almost like they're feeding your brain processed, fried, high
Mhm.
sugar, fatty foods.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
all the negativity. It's like, look, the real world has its problems. It's a lot better than the mainstream media makes it seem.
right.
Most people I run into, yeah, there's miserable individuals, but in general, I think the majority of people are good.
Hmm.
Other people think the majority of people are bad, but like it's just it's really good for my mental health, especially.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It feels better when you're more glass half full.
yeah, definitely.
And I know you mentioned, the great Steven Seagal, and he is a black belt in Aikido, which typically is known for joint locks, throws, and weapons competency. Not attributes that might necessarily help in the boxing ring, although he has worked with UFC champions Lyoto Machida, Anderson Silva, and Alex Pereira. What do you hope to learn from Seagal?
That's a good question. I will say this: Seagal is mostly known for Aikido because of the movies. Now he actually is, a black belt in several different karate systems.
Hmm.
Several degrees up. I actually know one of the guys who's very aware of his whole background. But again, it is boxing. It's not karate. It's not Aikido.
Hmm.
I think he's got some unorthodox techniques.
Hmm.
There's a reason why Alex Pereira specifically, like if you watch the training that he did with Alex and his
Yep.
coaches like love some of the stuff Seagal had showed them, and
There were some pretty
they
amazing
rave about.
blocks in there. He's had some pretty funky blocks, Seagal.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a way you could kind of implement that in any fighting competition. I think more of the benefit with Seagal will come. I want to do like karate combat. That's a sport
Mm.
that's an organization really blowing up. I think more of that training will come into play for that, or even bare knuckle boxing, because I know Seagal does a lot of conditioning with the market wire boards,
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
and
Yep.
as we've seen with Jake Paul, Mike Perry, bare knuckle, even though it's boxing, it is a completely different sport. Like he dominates bare knuckle, but it's kind of embarrassing how he looked in the regular boxing ring,
Yeah, yeah.
against Jake Paul. So there's things I think I'll get from Seagal that will be a lot. I know will be a lot more beneficial if I end up doing bare knuckle, or especially karate combat. But just training with him in general, you know, even like he'll show me some of his so-called secret techniques, stuff that I wouldn't be able to use
Sure.
necessarily in competition. I know there's some old school stuff that he's got, because we got to remember martial arts, were created and used in wars. I mean, these
Hmm.
weren't they watered a lot of this stuff down to be safer. I'll just put it that way.
Right, right. And you also train, and I know you're buddies with him. One of my favorite people that I got to interview, Don the Dragon Wilson. I got to interview him at the Ocean State Grand Nationals a couple of years ago, and man, he is such a friendly guy. And before we had our interview, I mean, just basically block off half the day though. You got to block off half the day if you're chatting with Don. He'll
Yeah,
talk to you
for sure.
forever. But look, I mean, he's a physical specimen at any age, right? He told me at the Ocean State Grands that he gets up in the morning, runs daily, and still hits the heavy bag for like 2 hours. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned from Don the Dragon Wilson?
He was just hitting the heavy bag earlier when I was
Right,
in the boxing gym, by the way.
unbelievable. I think he
And
would have I think he had his gloves. I think he would have laced them up with the young kids at the Ocean State Grands 2 years ago.
yeah, and he's still sparring. I sparred him quite a bit. Like he's still he is hard to hit. You know, he's barely got hit in his professional career. Like he's still got that, man. It's if you could touch Don, it's hard, man. His defense is on point. I'm gonna share a booth with him, by the way, tomorrow at the Dragons Fest.
Oh,
You know, me and
unbelievable.
Don had become very close. You know, as far as like the biggest thing I learned from him, he he's kind of what he does works for him. Because you know, he never warmed up before his fights.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
who does that? You know, they just, hey, it's
Yeah.
your time to fight. Okay, you know, they get up because he always wanted to. You know, he started off in White Lotus Kung Fu and wanted to test his martial arts in the real world. Now, to do that legally, obviously, you're not going to just, you know, you can't just get in street fights, right? So
Right.
he went into kickboxing. So he wanted to just, you know, you can't warm up in a real fight, so he never warmed up in his kickboxing fights to, you know, as he would put it, test his martial arts in real life.
Yeah.
And another, what was some other things he never stretches. He told me he never stretches.
What?
So I mean, the
Really?
biggest thing I learned from Don is that,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
you know, you can be a world champion and just do things your own way, and it could work for you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
like there's
I know you're
no
talking
there's
about
no
Bo
black and
Jackson.
white, basically. Yeah,
Well, but Herschel Walker, also a great Heisman guy, said that he would just have a bowl of soup before his full day of training. What? There are these
yeah, that's fun.
unbelievable, marvels,
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so look, this has been talked about a lot. I talked about it with Don and stuff, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it if you got an opinion on it. But all right, Wilson versus Van Dam, kickboxing. Wilson versus Van Dam, point fighting.
Okay. Like today or when they were in their prime?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Let's go prime because I mean, I obviously there's a lot of Don Wilson fights out there, and kickboxing he's one of the best. I mean, I don't think people realize how unless you watch the old fights, just how much of a brutal banger he was. I mean, he's
Yeah. As far as like kickboxing full contact, as much as I'm a fan of Van Damme and his style, and I'm trying not to be biased because I know Don, I train with Don.
right,
Just, you know, Don's history, his fight record, his experience, him being in the gyms all the time, even training just pure boxing. I know he trained a lot with Pat Goosen back in the day, and then obviously, you know, you pretty much have to give Don above like anybody in kickboxing. You know,
right,
I'm talking
right,
even like pros who have proven themselves. And Van Damme, we haven't seen any full contact fights. You know, I mean, yeah, the guy moves good, and he looks amazing on screen. I mean, there's a big difference, obviously, between movie fights and real fights. But just from a kickboxing full contact perspective, you got to pretty much put Don above anybody, man,
I think so.
because
Other than
he's an
maybe
11-time world
maybe
kickboxing
Bill
champion.
Wallace and him. If they were at the same time, you'd have to see that.
Well, they could have been. Bill was on his way out as Don was coming up. Had
Yeah,
Bill hung out for another year or two, we would have found out, you know, and that would have been an amazing fight. So Don in kickboxing, 100% over Van Dam. Now in point fighting, that's where things get interesting because
interesting.
that's kind of Van Dam's world in a way before the movies, because that he does have a record in point fighting,
Right,
and you know you don't have to have nearly the defense. It's almost more like fencing. You know, you're not
right,
in there like boxers where it's like you have to get hit. Yeah, I mean, you
right.
could win a whole point fighting match and not even get hit. Whereas boxing, it's like, no, you're gonna get hit. You know, in
Hmm.
kickboxing, obviously, it's like, no, you're definitely getting hit. Um, so because of Van Damme's dexterity and everything in his movement, you know, like I would not be surprised if he beat Don in a point fighting match.
Point fight. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's why very very
but
interesting
no,
stuff,
no
man.
way in real kickboxing. No way in real kickboxing.
Yeah.
Especially with the time I've spent with Don, even him being 70. He said, David, you should have seen me in, you know, the 1980s when I was in my prime. It's like I couldn't imagine if you're moving like this at 70. I could when he was like fighter of the year. There's no way anybody could have beat him, in my
No,
opinion.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. Scary, scary. And of course, I mean, he had the pretty boy look and everything like that, very unassuming. But so
Yeah.
tell me about your experience in Taekwondo and how has it helped you with the rigorous fight scenes needed for film shoots, given the focus on flexibility and kicking?
Oh, well, Taekwondo is, I mean, if you ask somebody like, oh, what martial art has the best kicks or the best looking kicks, people are going to say Taekwondo. So Taekwondo is very suited for film. I mean, Scott Adkins has a Taekwondo background, Philip and
Yep.
Simon Rhee, Taekwondo background. So you want those high kicks in movies. You really want those nice leg extensions. You want the good jumps. So anybody getting in the movie fighting, that's definitely a Taekwondo background is advantageous because
Yep.
you want to stick out and look good on screen. And people are way more impressed, if you jump up and kick someone in the head as opposed to in a real fight, you just want to blow their kneecap out. Like,
Right.
okay,
Right.
that's more effective, but it doesn't look as good. It's not going to impress people.
And do you do your own stunts? And would you like to do your own stunts?
I like to do my own fight scenes, and I've done them all, of course. Especially in these smaller independent films. Now, as far as like stunts in bigger films, I would never want to be the guy who falls down the stairs. Like
Yeah.
if I got punched and fell down, it's like, no
Yeah.
thanks. We'll get a stunt guy to do
Yeah,
that.
pass on that one.
I mean, some of the funner ones I'd like to do, like hanging off of a helicopter, assuming I got my cables and everything. I'd love to do that. The stuff that like Tom Cruise does a lot of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'd
man.
love to do
Crazy.
that. Yeah.
You know,
But the
you don't
stuff that
say
where you just fall in and rolling down the stairs, like, no thanks.
you'll you can pass on that one.
Yeah.
Being such a driven person, it can often be hard. I know. I mean, I've been working 7 days in a row for 8 years, but luckily I love what I do.
Oh.
Um, it can often be hard to maintain close relationships, intimate relationships, friends or otherwise. How do you balance your driven career with the amount of time you get to spend with your loved ones?
That's a good question, man. And I don't think I'm the best at it because I got divorced earlier this year in January,
It's coming from
which
another guy that isn't great at it too. So I'm not.
I mean,
I'm pointing the finger at me too, brother.
look, it was a good relationship. It was an 11-year relationship, married for 7. It ran its course. I know if we were still together, she would not be happy at all with how much time I spent away from home. I mean, I'm not even going to be back home till like the beginning of October.
Wow.
Been all over,
Wow.
and I'm even staying with my brother here in California because I found the right gym, Phil's gym. That's the same gym Don trains at. Luckily, right now I have a girlfriend who is very supportive and encouraging, and she lives in Ohio, and we don't see each other that much, at least during this fight camp. But she understands what I'm trying to do and how
Mhm.
important this stuff is for me. So if you find the person that is understanding, and some girls have to be with you all the time, other ones, and she's got her own life. Look, man, she's got kids,
So
she's
important,
got a
right? So
business.
important.
So yeah, if she's got a lot of other stuff going on in her life, you don't have to be with your partner all the time because there's so much other stuff going on. It's the people in the relationships when they don't have a lot of else going on. Because I've never been the guy where like I have to be in a relationship and like I'm part like I identify as like I'm this couple. That's never been me. I've always been more like an individual, but a relationship will add value to my life. But like I don't
Right,
need
right,
that.
right.
That's how I've always been.
Well said. Well said. And just talking about how famous and how much accolades your in views your podcast has gotten, the Viking Samurai. How much of a privilege has it been to be a vessel in which people share the stories of their lives with you?
It's been great, because like I said, I've completely become part of that world that I loved, and grew up watching. So when I was a stockbroker, I needed a creative outlet. That's one of the reasons why I started that YouTube channel. And I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? It's like, well, why don't I just talk about all these films that I always talk about anyway?
Yeah.
And it built a pretty good community because the channel is almost like a time machine where it brings people back to when they first started training martial arts or getting into the gym and they were young and full of hopes and dreams, you know. I mean, life beats that out of you as you get older. It does. But yeah, the channel brings people back to that magical time, you know, which I think is special. And me just sharing that and then getting to meet these people and just being an open ear and having them share the stories, getting details about, you know, some of these films that we would have never otherwise heard. You know, it's actually kind of funny because
Hmm.
Only the Strong, you know, first
Yeah.
big movie about capoeira, Mark Dacascos' big role, obviously written and directed by Sheldon Lettich, co-writer Luis Esteban.
Yep.
I have gotten more information out about that movie than probably anything else because if you
Hmm.
buy the DVD, it's bare bones. There's no bonus
Oh,
features. There's actually another YouTube channel, Joe Blow, big YouTube channel that covered Only the Strong and mentioned, hey, if you want to find out more, you could check out Viking Samurai's channel because he had interviewed all these guys. I
oh, nice.
interviewed I interviewed Paco Prieta, who played Savario. There's not like an
Oh,
if
that's
you
awesome. Great, great role. He
there's
did
not
great.
yeah, there's not like another Paco Prieta interview out there. It's like aside from mine, you know, and then the guy who was Mark Dacascos, his real life capoeira instructor and also the instructor in the movie, Master Aman, I interviewed him. I interviewed the co-writer Luis Esteban. Like I got
Awesome.
so much stuff. And it's not like that's the biggest movie, you know, but for that movie's important for a lot of people, you know.
Absolutely.
It was one of the better ones back in the day. And I was able to help share a lot of those stories by interviewing all these people and talking about it because who better to talk about it than the people who helped create it and who were there at the time.
Amazing. Amazing. And as you get more popular, I can't imagine this because I honestly, I mean, we spoke briefly on the phone before this. You're such you seem like such a nice guy, but how everybody's got haters eventually, right? As you get bigger and bigger, and people start talking, oh, why did this guy get the Mosley fight? What horseshoes up his butt? All this stuff. How do you tune that out, man? Right? Because they don't know you, they don't know how hard you've worked.
Yeah, it is annoying. One of my biggest haters actually was somebody I met through the channel. So there is one specific that I've talked to before, you know. But then you do have a lot of those randoms that they don't know anything about you, but they want to assume. And they
Mm,
just,
mm,
you know, like they'll just say stuff. It's almost like they don't want to give you any credit for anything you've accomplished. For example, I'm very proud that I'm a natural bodybuilder, that I've been natural my entire life.
yep.
Whereas you'll see comments, you know, they'll say, "Oh, how much of that do you take?" Or you have gyno. It's like I have so many shirtless pics. I do not have gyno. They just make shit up. That's like a side effect of steroid use, by the way. But it's
Yep.
like anybody could clearly see that I don't. Or they'll say, "Oh, you bought your subscribers on YouTube, you know, or Instagram," or "Oh, you paid to be in that movie." It's like, no, I didn't. Like I got receipts. You could see I got paid to be in this movie, you know. But it's almost like they don't want to give you credit as far as like, no, I built all my subscribers. I diet and worked my butt off in the gym for many years to build this naturally. I must have impressed somebody enough to pay me to be in a movie. It's like, but they don't want to give you credit, right?
Right. Right. No,
Yeah. So it's, I mean, for me, it's more self-reflective on them. They're obviously not happy with their position in life. So they always want to tear down somebody that they see is above them. So in a way, it's a compliment because I know that people talking crap, they know that I'm doing bigger things than
you're
they
on their
are. So, you
minds.
know, yeah,
Absolutely. All right. I got a couple more for you, but I know you got to go train, so I want to keep you
sure,
up.
sure.
But you mentioned, I think that right, your dad is European, your mom is Korean, right?
Hmm.
Who wins the culinary battle?
Um, I've,
I'm a big food dude, so I heard that. I'm like, oh well, are they both?
you
Because
know,
coming from an
it's,
Italian family, both of my parents could cook almost equally, and grandparents too. So I'm wondering, it's like, is there one over the other? Is there a preference?
I would say it's kind of a tie. They're both decent. I'll tell you where I really win and benefit though. My ex-wife and also my current girlfriend, amazing.
Oh,
Like,
nice.
and they both like to cook for me, and I like to eat what they cook. I mean, they cook so damn good. So that's who wins, man. Just the women that I end up meeting in my life. Luckily for me.
I feel that, man. My girlfriend's Puerto Rican, and it's not always the best for me, just like the Italian food. But man, I love to eat it, buddy. Man, I love to eat it.
For
And so,
sure.
look, you've achieved so much this past year. I think you mentioned before in past interviews that you have a journal, like a goal journal. What are some entries that might make your 2025 plans? What is David Viking Samurai Kurzhal doing in 2025 if he has his way?
Yeah, well, everything that I was doing last year, I felt would be setting me up for a very nice 2024, and everything I'm doing this year is going to set me up for a nice 2025. So my look, a lot of things that I feel like I'm going to accomplish and do. I briefly mentioned a screenplay that I wrote that that's the one, in my opinion, that I know will take me to the next level. That's going to get me so much attention. And I had some really good people give me feedback, like Sheldon Lettich, for example. He doesn't sugarcoat. He's not trying to be nice. If he thinks something's good, he'll say it's good. If he thinks something sucks, he'll say it sucks. He doesn't really care about somebody's feelings, That's just how he is.
Yeah,
But if he compliments something you've done, like my screenplay, then I know it's good. And he
yeah,
said some very nice things about it. And then there's another big producer in Hong Kong, Bay Logan. He's worked on so many films. He's a writer. He's a producer. He's acted in some of them. The first question that he asked me after he read this Blood Phoenix screenplay was, "Did you really write that?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "It's really good." I was like, "Thanks." So I just don't think he thought that, because he's a writer himself and had a lot of stuff produced. He just
yeah,
didn't think like, well, hey, that's not fair. How come this guy's writing such a good thing, So that was a nice backhanded compliment. So anyway, for 2025, I gotta get that movie made, and
yep.
then I gotta run off the momentum of that Mosley fight, because I know I'm gonna look good in there. Like, you can't,
Mhm.
nobody could predict what's going to happen in the fight and who's going to win. Now, obviously, the odds are going to be heavily skewed on his side, but nobody could predict the win. All I know is I know I'm putting in the work. I know I'm with the right people,
Right.
and I'm gonna look good in there. Like, it's good. People will be like, this guy actually really knows how to box. He's boxing this elite level guy, and he actually looks like he knows what he's doing, because I will, know what I'm doing. So I mentioned that because I know it's going to open doors to bigger fights.
Right.
Like, even if I lost against Mosley, looking good in there, it justifies a lot of
Huge.
other fights.
Huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
huge.
It's huge.
And especially in karate combat, so definitely I could see myself doing, probably another boxing match next year, but definitely karate combat, getting the film that I wrote made.
Yep.
And then, as I was telling you, I was doing these like independent films, after the Mosley fight, and then Bloodstorm's coming out, my first lead role, things like that. It's like, now I go to like a big, you know, agency, and,
Yeah.
and get representation, because you're not really even going to get the chance to audition in some big show or big movie unless you're connected to one of those people, right?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
So
So that's the goal next year, is to get in that big show or big movie.
so you're planting the seeds, man. You're planting the seeds, waiting for them to blossom.
Planting them, and watering them here and there, and they take time, but you gotta have faith and trust in the process, that they're doing their work underground. And I've talked about this before, even when, like, nobody else is going to see it, obviously, because you won't even see it. But that's where the faith and the trust in the process, that they are working underground, and
Right.
it could take months, it could take years, but if you keep watering them, they'll eventually break through and bear fruit for you.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Any pre-fight rituals? Lastly, you got any pre-fight rituals you're doing before that you did before the other fight or before the Mosley fight, or what are you doing? You superstitious dude or
Not really superstitious. I mean, I just try to visualize, just like move in a certain way, and do, there's almost like I put this vision in my head of how it plays out, and try to manifest that, because I think that's where all manifestations occur, with just these thoughts that you have in your head that you can bring into reality, right? So there's no superstitions, but there's a lot of like manifesting and thoughts and seeing how it plays out. And, like I'm having the fight play out in my head, knowing how I'm going to be able to move, watching a lot of his fights, how he moves. So that's what I'm doing.
Nice, man. Well, David, thank you so much, man, for spending the time with me. I know you're gonna look good because you don't strike me as someone who likes to look bad. So I know you're gonna do everything to make yourself look good. I think it's gonna be a good fight. So I hope to either Philly's not too far from me, so I hope to either maybe be there.
Oh, you gotta be there in person, man.
I'm gonna try, buddy. I'm sure as hell gonna try. But look,
Okay.
man, I appreciate it. I hope you and I stay connected, and everybody, you gotta be there September 28th. David Viking Samurai Kurzhal versus Sugar Shane Mosley. It's gonna be fireworks, baby. It's gonna be fireworks. And that's a wrap, folks, for this incredible conversation with David Kurzhal, a man who's not chasing his dreams, he's fighting for them. And on September 28th, he'll be facing the legendary Sugar Shane Mosley in the main event of celebrity boxing. It's a real-life Rocky story unfolding, and one thing's for sure, win or lose, David is set to inspire everyone watching with his relentless determination and fighting spirit. We'll be rooting for him every step of the way. Thanks for tuning in to Between Rounds, and don't miss what's sure to be a fight for the ages.